Adrian's tall frame cut through the silence like a blade. The CEO, the billionaire, the man whose name was whispered in boardrooms across the globe, and the husband, Patricia, had just dismissed as imaginary. He stopped directly beside Celeste, his hand immediately resting on her shoulder, a silent shield of protection. His voice, low but carrying through the hushed dining room, was lethal in its calm. "Did you just put your hands on my wife?" The word wife rang like a thunderclap. Gasps rippled across the tables. Phones rose higher, recording every second. Patricia's smirk faltered for the first time, her practiced confidence cracking like porcelain. I don't know what you're talking about. She stammered, her eyes darting to the manager for backup. This woman was out of line. "I simply defended myself." Adrian leaned closer, his green eyes blazing. "Defended yourself? From what?" "A quiet woman sitting alone at her table. You humiliated her. You assaulted her. And now you're lying about it in front of dozens of witnesses." The manager shifted uncomfortably, his eyes locked on the glowing red mark on Celeste's cheek. "Mr. Williams, please, if we could just..." Adrien cut him off with a sharp wave of his hand. "Don't. You had a chance to do the right thing, and instead you tried to move her the victim." Pathetic. Gasps spread again. Patricia's face drained of color as the realization dawned. Adrien Williams. The Adrien Williams, billionaire, founder of Nexus Innovations, one of the most powerful men in the country, and he was standing there, fury radiating off him like a storm, ready to unleash it all on her. "You don't belong here," Patricia blurted desperately, her voice high and brittle now. "She doesn't belong here." Adrian's voice dropped to a near whisper, but the weight of it silenced the room. "She belongs everywhere I am. And after tonight, you won't belong anywhere." The restaurant erupted in murmurs. Phones captured every word. Patricia's face crumpled as her empire of entitlement collapsed around her in exactly 60 seconds. Patricia's lips trembled, her confidence evaporating in front of the very audience she used to command. The once adoring socialites now whispered with disgust, their phones angled to catch every second of her downfall. Adrien straightened, his presence filling the room, and spoke with the effortless authority of a man used to boardrooms bowing to his word. "You think status is something you inherit from your last name, Patricia? That money or invitations give you power, but real power is respect. And you lost that the moment you laid a hand on her." Patricia shook her head wildly, desperate to recover her composure. "This is ridiculous. Everyone here knows me. They know who I am. They'll never believe some stranger over me." Adrian's laugh was cold, almost pitying. "You're right about one thing. Everyone here does know you. And now they'll never forget this moment." His words hit like a gavel, striking down a final sentence. The manager swallowed hard. "Mr. Williams, please, what do you want us to do?" Adrian's gaze didn't leave Patricia's. "What you should have done the second she crossed the line. Remove her." Tonight, Patricia Armitage dines in the gutter she created for herself. The restaurant gasped collectively as 2 security guards approached. Patricia recoiled, her voice breaking. "No, you can't. Do you know who my family is? Do you know what I can do to this place?" Audrey stepped aside as the guards gently but firmly pulled her away from the table. The world will know exactly who you are, Patricia. By morning, you won't be able to buy a cup of coffee without someone replaying this clip. Her shrill protests echoed through the dining room, but no one moved to help. No one defended. Her phone stayed raised, capturing every second of her public exile, and then silence fell again. Audrey turned back to Celeste, his expression softening instantly as he cupped her face, brushing his thumb lightly against the mark Patricia had left. "Are you all right, love?" he asked, his voice breaking the tension with a tenderness that contrasted so sharply with the storm that had just passed. For the first time that night, Celeste allowed herself to smile, not out of victory, but out of relief. By morning, the entire city was buzzing. Patricia Armitage's meltdown had gone viral overnight. The videos spread across every social platform. Her face contorted in rage. Her desperate screams, her threats about her family's power. Headlines were merciless. Heiress humiliated. Patricia Armitage kicked out of five-star restaurant society darn turns. Social pariah Patricia Armitage learns about a dozen by respect. Every major outlet picked up this story, and even the most loyal socialites who once clung to her presence suddenly distanced themselves, issuing statements pretending they had always known Patricia was toxic. At the Armitage estate, her parents were livid, but not at Celeste. At Patricia, the family had spent decades building a pristine reputation, and now their daughter had torn it down in a single evening. "You've destroyed everything," her mother hissed at her over breakfast. The morning papers laid out like a crime scene. "Do you have any idea what kind of scandal you've brought on this family?" Patricia tried to argue, tried to pin it on Celeste, but no one was listening. Her father's silence was worse than his words, a silence that meant her inheritance. Her position, even her seat at the table, were no longer secure. Meanwhile, Adrien and Celeste watched the chaos unfold from the quiet safety of their home. Adrien had shielded her from the worst of the storm, but Celeste knew this wasn't just his battle, it was hers. To Dot, as she scrolled through the endless videos and comments, something shifted inside her. For years, she had been underestimated, treated like she was weak, like she didn't belong in the rooms Patricia walked through so effortlessly. But now, the world had witnessed her strength. Adrien wrapped an arm around her, pressing a kiss to her temple. "She can't hurt you anymore. It's over." Celeste looked at him, her eyes steady. "No, Adrien. This is just the beginning." Weeks passed, and the scandal never lost its sting. Patricia tried every tactic: silence, apologies, even a public relations campaign. But the damage was permanent. She became a cautionary tale, her name synonymous with entitlement and disgrace. Celeste, on the other hand, found herself walking into rooms with a new presence. People looked at her differently now, not as Adrien's quiet partner, but as a woman who had faced cruelty and refused to break. One evening, as she stood on the balcony overlooking the city lights, Adrien joined her. His hand slipped into hers, warm and steady. "You've changed," he whispered, admiration softening his voice. Celeste smiled faintly. "No, I didn't change. I just stopped hiding." The night air carried her words into the silence, and for the first time, she felt no shadow over her. Patricia's fall had not just been revenge, it had been liberation. And in that quiet moment, Celeste knew. Her story was only beginning. Adrian's chair scraped back slowly, the sound sharp and final in the hushed restaurant. He rose to his full height, towering, every inch of his presence radiating fury and absolute authority. "You dare," he said, his voice like steel, "to stand in front of me, in front of my wife, and spit venom, is a lie." Patricia faltered, her bravado already cracking, but Adrien didn't give her room to breathe. "Everything she has, she earned long before she met me. Everything you are rests on the name of your husband and the illusion of class. You are nothing but entitlement dressed in Chanel." Gasps rippled again. Patricia's mouth opened, desperate to fire back, but Adrian's voice cut her off like a blade. "You wanted to play this out publicly. Fine. Then let the world hear me now." He turned deliberately to the crowd, to the phones raised high. His hand tightened around Celeste's. "This woman, Celeste Williams, is my equa, my partner, my heart. She doesn't need my fortune to define her because she has something no amount of money can buy: integrity, compassion, worth, and anyone who dares question that, dares disrespect her, disrespects me." The room erupted in applause, the sound rolling like thunder. Diners stood, clapping, some cheering, their support drowning out Patricia's spluttering protests. Patricia's face collapsed in defeat. For the first time, she seemed to understand fully. This was over. No redemption arc, no escape. Her reputation wasn't just bruised, it was obliterated. Adrien guided Celeste toward the exit, his arm protectively around her. At the doorway, he paused and looked back one final time. "Remember this night, Patricia Hart, because it will follow you for the rest of your life. Actions have consequences, and you chose yours." With that, they walked out together into the night. Adrian's hand was firm on Celeste's, and she held her head high, not as a billionaire's wife, but as a woman who had just claimed her dignity before the world. Behind them, Patricia sat slumped, surrounded by the wreckage of her pride, and the knowledge that she had made an enemy she could never defeat. The fallout was immediate. By the next morning, Patricia's name was everywhere. The video of her screaming gold digger at Celeste had gone viral overnight. Clipped, subtitled, and replayed on every platform. Comment sections were flooded with words like entitled, bitter, jealous. The very socialites who once clung to Patricia like moths to a flame now kept their distance, deleting photos, untagging her, pretending they'd never called her a friend. Reporters swarmed the Hartwell estate, their cameras hungry for a glimpse of the woman who had been so publicly humiliated. Inside, Patricia sat with the curtains drawn, scrolling furiously through the avalanche of headlines. Patricia, Hartwell meltdown. Billionaire's wife called a gold digger in public showdown. Adori, Indy, Fenzo Ceresto, she's my equal. High society, queen, falls from grace. Her phone buzzed relentlessly. Friends, acquaintances, even her own relatives. But the tone was always the same, scolding, cold, or pitying. "Patricia, how could you embarrass the family like this. Her brother snapped over the line, "Do you understand what you've done to our name?" But Patricia didn't answer. She couldn't. The weight of her downfall pressed down too heavily. Meanwhile, across town, Adrien and Celeste's world was brighter than ever. Messages poured in, not of pity, but of admiration. "You handled that with so much grace. Celeste, you're an inspiration. Adrien, the way you defended your wife. Men should take notes." Instead of being diminished, Celeste had risen, and Patricia, she had become the cautionary tale whispered about in the very circles she once ruled. Thought the storm would pass. After all, scandals had erupted before in their circle, and with enough time and money, reputations could be salvaged. But this was different. Weeks went by, and instead of fading, the humiliation clung to her name like a stain that refused to wash out. Every charity gala she once presided over suddenly no longer required her attendance. Invitations she once received first were never sent. Doors that had always been open were now firmly shut. Her so-called friends avoided her. Calls, or worse, answered with thinly veiled disdain. "Oh, Patricia, still recovering." You know, some people say you should apologize publicly, though, of course, it may be too late for that. Even her daughter, who had once basked in her mother's reputation, now recoiled from the whispers at her private school. "Why did you do it, Mom?" she cried one night. "Why did you call her that?" Now everyone looks at me like I'm a joke. That, more than anything, gutted Patricia. She had tried to hold on to control to secure her place at the top, and instead, she had dragged her own family into disgrace. Meanwhile, Adrien and Celeste thrived. Their philanthropy projects gained momentum, their names attached to innovation, kindness, and vision. Where Patricia was crumbling, they were building. Where she lost power, they gained influence. And Patricia, she became a ghost of her former self. Once the woman others envied. Now, the cautionary example people whispered about with pity, the crown she had clawed for had slipped not into the hands of a rival socialite, but into the hands of the very woman she once dismissed as a nobody. In the end, Patricia became a living reminder of how quickly arrogance can turn to ashes. The woman who once ruled her world with cutting words and a polished smile was reduced to whispers, side glances, and exclusion. Meanwhile, Adrien and Celeste carried themselves with quiet dignity, never needing to rub their success in Patricia's face. Their influence grew not from scandal, but from respect, something Patricia had never understood until it was far too late. For every bridge Patricia had burned, Adrien and Celeste built to more grounded in integrity and vision. Their names rose higher, not because they sought revenge, but because they lived with purpose. Patricia, stripped of her crown, had no choice but to watch as the world shifted without her. And so the story closed as it began with a queen. Only now the crown rested where it truly belonged. 3 months later, Patricia Hartwell was sentenced to community service and ordered to attend anger management classes. Her husband's company collapsed under the weight of the lost contract, forcing them to sell their Beverly Hills mansion and abandon the high society lifestyle they once flaunted so proudly. But that night, None of that mattered to Adrena and Celeste Williams. What mattered was that they had walked through the fire together and emerged stronger than ever. Celeste had discovered that she didn't need to prove her worth to anyone, not to Patricia, not to society, not to the whispers of strangers. The only thing that mattered was the love she and Adrene had built. A love grounded in respect, authenticity, and unshakable trust. Patricia had tried to break them. Instead, she had forged them into something unbreakable, and as Celeste sat across from Adrene, smiling genuinely for the first time in months, she finally understood. She didn't need to belong in anyone else's world. Together, they had created a world of their own, and that was more than enough. What did you think of Celeste's journey tonight? Have you ever had to choose between fitting in and staying true to yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story inspired you, send it to someone who needs a reminder of the power of love over fear. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed it, you'll absolutely love the next one. It's even more gripping than you can imagine. So don't miss it. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to keep watching. They say family is supposed to be your biggest supporter, but for me, family was the first to laugh, the first to doubt, and eventually the first to betray me. On the day I graduated, a moment that was supposed to be the proudest of my life, my parents turned it into the cruelest humiliation I had ever experienced. As I walked across that stage to accept my diploma, I searched the audience for their faces. And when I saw them, instead of pride, instead of joy, I saw disappointment, disgust. My name is Eleanor, and while most of my classmates were being cheered for, I was being silently disowned. You see, my family had always dreamed of me becoming a doctor, a lawyer, something they could brag about at country club luncheons. But I had chosen a different path, one they considered beneath them, one they called filthy. And when the graduation ended, instead of congratulations, they whispered a sentence that would change my life forever. You are no longer our daughter. That's when I realized my success had never been for me. It had always been about them. But this time, I wasn't going to let their expectations chain me. This time, I was walking away. I stood there in my cap and gown, the diploma trembling in my hands, while my parents turned their backs on me. Everyone else's families were taking photos, hugging, crying, tears of joy. Mine, they marched out of that auditorium as if I were a disgrace. That night, I sat in my dorm room alone, staring at the blinking cursor on my phone screen. 100 times, I typed out a message to my mom, hoping maybe she'd soften, maybe she'd remember I was still her daughter. But every time I deleted it, deep down, I knew the truth. Their love was conditional on me fitting into their mold. I had chosen to study social work. I wanted to fight for kids who didn't have a voice, kids who were neglected, abandoned, abused. To me, it was a calling, but to my parents, it was dirty work. They said helping the poor brought shame on the family name. And then the final blow came a week after graduation. A lawyer showed up at my apartment door. My parents had officially rewritten their will. I wasn't just cut out emotionally, I was cut out financially to every cent, every asset, every piece of inheritance I once thought I'd share as their daughter was gone. But what they didn't realize was that cutting me out of their fortune was the very thing that would push me toward building my own. Years passed. I worked tirelessly in social work, climbing the ranks, turning my empathy into influence. What started as a tiny apartment job helping foster kids grew into something I never could have imagined. I built a nationwide foundation dedicated to protecting children. Donors, politicians, and even celebrities supported the cause. And me, the disgrace of the family. I became a name that mattered, not because of inherited wealth, but because I made a difference. One day, at a charity gala my foundation hosted, I saw them again. My parents, their expensive clothes couldn't hide the cracks. Their investments had collapsed. Their reputation was crumbling, and suddenly they were the ones desperate for connections. They approached me at the table, their voices shaky, their eyes pleading. For the first time in my life, they needed me. "Eleanor," my father said, his tone softer than I'd ever heard it, perhaps. "We misjudged you. Perhaps you could help us." I let the silence hang. The same silence they gave me when they walked out of my graduation. Then, with calm steadiness, I smiled. "I built this life without you," I said, "and I don't need your approval now." I turned away, the applause of my supporters filling the room as my parents stood there, powerless. For years, I thought being cut out of their will was the end of me. But in truth, it was the beginning. Sometimes families' rejection is the very thing that frees you to build the life you were destined to live.